May you have a lot of joy, good health, happiness, peace, and everything. Now, let's just continue our discussion of Walt Whitman. The previous lecture, I gave a short introduction to the biographical details of Walt Whitman. I spoke about his parents. I spoke about the very place he was born, and I also spoke about his schooling, his career, his education, and we saw that Walt Whitman is a transcendentalist, and he was also a mystic. So, in our further discussion of Walt Whitman, we will discuss some of the very aspects of his poetry. Like previous day, we saw the important themes in the poetry of Walt Whitman, and we know that Whitman's poems deal with three major themes, like his poem, some of the important themes. We have the very American people and the very representation of democracy in the poetry of Walt Whitman. So the representation of American people and American democracy is one of the themes of Walt Whitman's poetry. Other than that, we understand that death is a theme of Walt Whitman's poetry. Death is very much there in many of his poems. We will look at the major poems of Walt Whitman which deal with death. And besides these two, like democracy as a theme and death as a theme, we know that his poetry also deals with sex and sensuousness, right? That's about the theme of the poetry. And we can just consolidate or summarize the fact that he is the father of free verse. He is, of course, a poet, essayist, and journalist, and a humanist. And now let's look at the major anthology, that is the very original anthology which he revised now and then, that is Leaves of Grass. And many critics consider Leaves of Grass of Walt Whitman as a national epic. It is a national epic because this poem, as well as the very anthology Leaves of Grass, is just representing, it is just projecting or delineating the very American life. And now that this poem, Leaves of Grass, is a representation of the American life, it is considered to be a national epic. And you will see that the Leaves of Grass is about the very great themes of war. We have the war, the Civil War in United States of America. So it's about the theme of war. The Leaves of Grass deals with themes of war. It's about the fortunes of battles. So also it's about the making of perfect soldiers. Okay, so these are some of the major themes that come in Leaves of Grass. And because of all these reasons, rather because it is embodying the very ideals of American life, we can say that the Leaves of Grass, the major anthology of poetry of Whitman, is considered to be a national epic. And besides, we also see that as we go through the very poem or the poems in the collection Leaves of Grass, we understand that he is a champion of, he's praising democracy, and he's just glorifying the ideals the Americans lived for, or rather Americans lived and stood for. So we can say that he is, Whitman is an archpriest of Americanism. Okay, so we just have to discuss and argue that he is also an archpriest of Americanism, because he is an innovator in poetry, I said in the previous class about the significance of Eugene O'Neill to American theater and American drama. Similarly, I said that Walt Whitman has also a lot of significance in American poetry because he experimented with free verse, right? And he is an innovator, and he, of course, upheld the ideals of individualism in his poetry. Okay, so we can see a lot of similarities between the romantic poets like William Wordsworth and William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge together, and Walt Whitman in American poetry. So Leaves of Grass again is it has, of course, a lot of qualities of the very lyrical ballads of 1798, right? And now we can say that, right, it is just like the very definition of poetry of William Wordsworth. It has, Leaves of Grass has the very spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. Okay, so we can see a lot of similarities between the poems in the lyrical ballads and Leaves of Grass of Walt Whitman. Okay, so we know that he is, of course, a representative American poet, and of course, he was against the European literature. He found, Walt Whitman found a lot of faults with, or rather demerits with, European literature. And according to Whitman, European literature had a lot of problems. One of the major problems is, we know that the European society, the British, you study the social and political history of Britain, and we know that the European society, or Britain, was, of course, very much feudal. So one of the, just like the society being feudal, one of the demerits of European literature, according to Walt Whitman, is the literature is also feudal. All right, and we know that feudalism is against democracy, and it is, of course, see, European literature is feudal. Similarly, European literature is also undemocratic. And these are the two reasons, two of the major accusations or demerits of European literature, according to Whitman. One, it is feudal. Number two, it is undemocratic, European literature. And Whitman finds fault with European literature. And he also says that it is, European literature is dividing people. Yeah, it is an extension of feudalism, so also an extension of being undemocratic. So how is European literature undemocratic, or how is it feudal? Okay, it is dividing human beings. According to Walt Whitman, European literature is dividing people on the basis of class and gender. So gender discrimination, class and racial discrimination is one of the major problems of European literature, according to Walt Whitman. And he just wants to, rather, Whitman tried to make a kind of new literature or a kind of new poetry, which is not just dividing people, which is not against democracy. So Leaves of Grass is an attempt to just of course, resolve the problems of the very European literature which Whitman criticized. Okay, and we can say that to a certain extent, Walt Whitman succeeded, not to a certain extent, to maybe, of course, right, a great extent, Walt Whitman succeeded to just resolve the problems he found with European literature. Like, European literature is feudal, it is undemocratic, it is dividing people into of course, different groups, or there is a kind of division of people based on race, class, and gender. Okay, and we can say that what he does in his poetry is just asserting the significance of democracy. And according to Whitman, an ideal American, he tells who an ideal American is in his poem, in his poems, in his poetry, in all his anthologies. Okay, he speaks about an ideal American, and according to him, according to Walt Whitman, an ideal American is illimitably proud. There is no boundary for the pride of an American. There must not be any boundary or limit for the pride of an American. Every Americans must be ideal citizens. They must be proud of themselves, right? So how can maybe a citizen, no matter whether it is, of course, American or maybe British or French or Spanish, right? Okay, he speaks about, when we discuss Whitman, of course, we speak about the American, right? And according to Walt Whitman, an American must be, right, an ideal American, an ideal citizen, and he must be proud of himself. He must be independent. This is very important. He must be independent. An ideal American must be independent. Independent, okay, the very concept of freedom, the very concept of independence is right. It's very, very huge, right? The concept of independence is, it is not just political independence, right? Being independent refers to, okay, your individual independence, right? You must be mentally, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, okay, whichever ways you need to be, you must be independent, right? So an ideal American, according to Whitman, must be independent, no boundary for any American, right? So he must also be self-possessed, right? Okay, self-possessed, right? A feeling of being what an individual is, right? Then, of course, an ideal American, according to Walt Whitman, must be generous. He must be generous and he must be gentle. And this longing or this search for, or this attempt to have, or the attempt to, of course, right, to be an ideal American, Whitman had, and he's just speaking about how to be an ideal American in all his poetry, in all his poems and anthologies, right? So as I said, he speaks about American people, American democracy. He speaks about death. He speaks about sex and sensuousness. So remember, when you just go into learning Whitman, of course, you may have to make papers like Whitman, sex and sensuousness in the poetry of Whitman, death in the poems of Whitman, democracy, or rather Whitman as a champion of democracy. All these topics you can just, these are all general topics, you can just elaborate. So please remember all these topics. And now let us just continue our discussion of Whitman's poetry. So what are again, okay, I said the themes, right? The three important themes we have seen, like it's about democracy, it's about, of course, death, it's about sex and sensuousness, right? And now, who are the people you see in the poetry of Walt Whitman? That's a major question, right? So, okay, you would always, when you read Frost, yeah, Frost is again, Frost comes after Whitman, but we know that Frost, what's his poetry known as? You know that Frost poetry begin in delight and end in wisdom. True in the case of Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, or like Birches, or Mending Wall, right? Any poem of Frost just begin in delight, like Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening again, right? To like Raw Not Taken again, right? Okay, all these poems, right? There is delight, there is again wisdom. Okay, so similarly, again, it is said that Frost poetry is people talking, but let us discuss what is the poetry of Whitman about. Whom do you see in the poetry of Whitman? Okay, and the answer is quite simple. You see Americans in the poetry of Whitman. Like you have the ordinary Americans, the very poorest of the poor, the workers, okay, then again the soldiers, the sailors, the navigators, the farmers, okay, all these people you have in the poetry of Walt Whitman. Say, for example, you see blacksmiths, you see Negroes, you see the soldier, you see the shoemaker. So he is a representative of all the Americans. No question of being the big or the small, right? And that's about the people in the poetry of Walt Whitman. And now, yeah, as you read the poems, most of the poems, right? Some of the poems are about the Civil War. You know that he worked as a nurse in the Civil War, and we understand from his poetry that he was quite sad about the American Civil War. And you know the very famous poem. Maybe some of you might have recited this poem, "Oh Captain, My Captain," right? That's again about the death of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so he was not just a mere poet, Walt Whitman. So this is just a general introduction to Walt Whitman and his poetry. So he was not just a poet, he was in fact a prophet. And yeah, all poets are prophets, right? Okay, so he was a prophet and a champion of democracy. And he speaks about democracy in his poetry. And now, okay, we also, another theme, or rather, yeah, another topic in the poetry of Walt Whitman is of course, yeah, death is the theme of, rather, yeah, one of the major themes in the poetry of Walt Whitman. Now we are looking at some of the poems in which death is a recurrent theme. Say, for example, Leaves of Grass, you have the theme of death. Similarly, you have the poem Song of Myself, right? Please read all these poems. Okay, Song of Myself, you have references. Death is a central theme in these two. Similarly, another major poem of Walt Whitman which deal with death is When Lilacs Last on the Dooryard Bloomed. When Lilacs Last on the Dooryard Bloomed, another major poem which deals with death. Yet another one is the beautiful poem Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. This is again another wonderful poem about death. And death is, of course, seen as a female bird in this beautiful poem, Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking, right? And another poem is "Oh Captain, My Captain," about death. It's about the murder of Abraham Lincoln. A beautiful poem, say, that shows the very pain maybe most of the Americans experienced when they heard about the death of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, "Oh Captain, My Captain," the very, very touching beginning, right? And I look at some of the lines like, but I with mournful tread walk the deck on the captain lies fallen cold and dead, right? So America is compared to a ship, and the captain of the ship was, of course, Abraham Lincoln. And the poem is about the great pain all the Americans experience or undergo when the captain of the ship is no more. Okay, so then I said again, right? Sex and sensuousness is another theme of the poetry of Walt Whitman. So love is, according to Whitman, love is necessary, sex is necessary. And he, in many of his poems, goes for a very detailed graphic description of man woman relationship. Okay, so he is, of course, arguing that love is necessary. And remember, it is because of the this particular aspect of the poetry of Walt Whitman that Leaves of Grass was banned in United States of America, and Whitman lost his job in the government department. Okay, so now besides all this, I said that he experimented with words, like he was, of course, a champion of technical innovations in poetry, Walt Whitman. So Leaves of Grass is, of course, a poem, or rather an anthology, which is just uh, emphasizing the fact that he was just breaking the conventions of traditional poetry, and he's just rejecting the traditional meter and rhyme, and he writes in free verse. So also his poetry, as I said some time ago, okay, it's about the shoemakers, it's about the carpenters, it's about farmers, and yeah, his poems deal with the common man, and that's again something very, very special about the poetry of Walt Whitman. In short, we can say that Walt Whitman rejected the conventional notions or rules about poetry. Okay, so that's about the theme of poetry, the very content of poetry. Okay, so also he just rejected the notion of meter and rhyme in poetry. Okay, and he always wanted to project the realistic picture of America in his poems, and of course he elaborated, like you look at the poetry of Whitman, maybe look at some of the poems. Okay, very poem we study, Passage to India, you can see that sometimes some of the stanzas some of the stanzas are very, very big, right? Long extended run-on lines you have, and maybe they just look like huge big paragraphs, right? So this structure, rather this elaborate sentence structure, and the very structure, big extended stanza structure, Walt Whitman happened to have under the influence of the Bible, right? Okay, so Bible also influenced him, and of course the blank verse of William Shakespeare also influenced Walt Whitman. So the elaborate sentence structure in the poetry of Walt Whitman comes to him under the influence of the Holy Bible, and he becomes a champion of free verse under the influence of William Shakespeare, and later, of course, he is designing free verse as a style for himself, right? He designed his own free verse, or rather freestyle in his poetry. Okay, and now let us just think of some of the concepts of Whitman about democracy. What are the major ideas or concepts of democracy we get from the poetry of Whitman? Because we say that he is, of course, a champion of democracy. So rather, we are discussing maybe general topic. You will have to discuss Walt Whitman as a democratic poet. Now we are looking at some of the poems of Whitman, so that which help us to argue the fact that he is a democratic poet. Okay, so Whitman, according to most of the critics of the 20th century, is the greatest of American poets who combined humanitarian aspects of the common man with the deep, comprehensive conception of democracy. So, because of his humanitarian aspects, and because of his great care for the common man, Walt Whitman is considered to be a democratic poet. Okay, and uh, another reason for considering him to be a democratic poet is, so he has a okay, you have the very definition of democracy is of course right, for the people of the people and by the people and all. So according to Walt Whitman, um, he believed that so democracy must be the kingdom of heaven on earth. Democracy, according to Walt Whitman, is the kingdom of heaven on earth. So from this, it's very clear what democracy must be according to Walt Whitman. Okay, he says that democracy must be a kingdom of heaven on earth. You know what is heaven? Okay, yeah, we know that everybody is quite happy and content and satisfied and very, very joyful in heaven. So that should be democracy according to Walt Whitman. Okay, so we can say that he is right, Whitman. How can you have heaven on this earth? And Whitman, he is an uncompromising champion of, or an uncompromising apostle of fraternity. You know what fraternity is? Yeah, fraternity is, of course, right, brotherhood, right? Brotherhood. Yeah, the kind of love a citizen for others. Like we say, yeah, all Indians are my brothers and sisters, right? That is fraternity. So Walt Whitman, all his life was an apostle of fraternity. This is the reason why we say that among Whitman is a poet of the a poet of democracy, or rather, we substantiate the fact that Whitman is a democratic poet. So he is an apostle of fraternity. He is also an apostle of equality. Remember, this is the reason why. These are the reasons why we call him a democratic poet. He is an apostle of equality. Then he is also an apostle of liberty. I don't have to explain all these terms. He is also an apostle of right individualism, individual liberty. All right. So these are the reasons why we say that Whitman is a democratic poet. Okay. And now, his poetry is of course symbolic again, right? Just like Tagore's poetry is symbolic. Okay, Whitman's poetry is also symbolic. We have grass, leaves of grass. Okay, so grass maybe in the poetry of Whitman symbolically stands for many ideas, many concepts, right? So, in fact, I'm just speaking to you a little bit about symbolism in the poetry of Walt Whitman right now. So, grass is one side, it is symbolic of the poet's indisposition woven out of hopeful green stuff. Okay, grass is a symbol of hope, grass, right? Green color, greenery, leaves of grass. It's symbolic of hope. It's symbolic of optimism. Something like in your Shelley, you have if winter comes, can spring be far behind. Okay. Similarly, grass is on one side symbolic of hope. The other side, it is again the grass is a symbolic of right the very hands of God. It's symbolic of the very presence of God. Okay, so similarly, it is again a symbol of right the very vegetation and yeah, the very flora and fauna. Okay, grass. Similarly, we have many recurring symbols in the poetry of Walt Whitman. Okay, and now let us just move forward to all right another important aspect of the poetry of Walt Whitman. I said that Whitman was, of course, a transcendentalist, right? So transcendentalism. One topic for our discussion is transcendentalism in the poetry of Walt Whitman, and we said that a transcendentalist is somebody who is just powerful enough to just go for a kind of spiritual union with with God. So similarly, we have to consider mysticism in the poetry of Walt Whitman, or rather, we have to look at Walt Whitman as a mystic poet. Walt Whitman as a mystic poet. Okay, so who now we have to discuss who is a mystic poet, or rather, why do we consider Walt Whitman as a mystic poet? Okay, so let us just look at some of the important characteristic of a mystic. Who is a mystic? Okay, so a mystic is one who believes in the existence of the soul. Okay, so we are looking at mysticism in the poetry of Walt Whitman, or we are just considering Walt Whitman as a mystic. And now, in order to consider Walt Whitman as a mystic, we have to look at the aspect of a mystic. So one of the aspects of major aspects of a mystic is a mystic believes in the soul. A mystic believes in the existence of the soul. And second aspect of mystic is he believes in the existence of the God. Number one, a mystic believes in the existence of the soul, like life after death. Number two, a mystic believes in God. All right. And number three, a mystic believes in the divine spirit. Maybe when I say 1, 2, 3, you may think, isn't it same? Aren't all these same? No, they're not same. Number one, a mystic believes in the existence of the soul. And what is the soul? The soul is the spirit in each, the very, very energy in each of us. Okay, the soul. All right, the individual soul. And a mystic, remember, believes in God. And what is God, right? You know, God Almighty. All right, that is the very over soul, the very Paramatma. Aurobindo, Indian mysticism, Hindu mythology, you have the oversoul. So a mystic believes in the soul, existence of the soul. A mystic believes in the existence of God. And number three, a mystic believes in the divine spirit, the spirit of the God, the spirit of the God. Like you have in Christianity the concept of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and of course the Spirit. Okay, so a mystic believes in the divine spirit, the spirit of God. And according to a mystic, the spirit of God is prevalent everywhere. So these are three of the major aspects of mysticism or a mystic. A mystic, I repeat, this is just a repetition, believes in the existence of the soul, believes in the existence of God, believes in divine spirit. And number four, a mystic believes in the immortality of the human soul. All right? Immortality of the human soul. Okay? We have a soul, and the soul is immortal. No death for the soul. That is the fourth aspect of a mystic. A mystic believes in the immortality of the soul. And number five, a mystic believes in, this is the most important thing. Okay, this is what we see in the poem of Walt Whitman. This is what we see in the poetry of every mystic poet. Aurobindo, Tagore. Okay, maybe in Ullur again you can see it, right? Okay, number five, fifth aspect, right? Believes in, a mystic poet or a mystic believes in the capacity of the human being to establish a contact with the very, very God or the the soul of God or the divine spirit. Okay, so this is very important. A mystic believes that a human being can have a contact with the God, the Spirit of God. Okay, so in short, we can just consolidate or conclude the fact that a mystic is a person who believes in, right, all this, like the existence of the soul, the very existence of God, the divine spirit, the immortality of the human soul, and also believes in the capacity of the human being to establish a kind of confluence, coming together, or intercourse or communication between the spirit of man, or rather his spirit, and the divine spirit. Okay, so when we consider all these things and look at the poetry of Walt Whitman, look at Walt Whitman, we understand that we can just substantiate the fact that Whitman is a mystic, and most of his poems are assertions of the fact that he is a mystic poet. Okay, and this can be just established with an analysis of the poems, maybe 5 or 6 poems help us to substantiate the fact that Walt Whitman is a mystic poet, and the major poems that help us to argue or substantiate the fact that Whitman is a mystic poet is, number one, the anthology Leaves of Grass, the very poem Leaves of Grass. Number two, Song of Myself of Walt Whitman. Number three is the poem which is prescribed for us, Passage to India. I'll start the discussion of Passage to India very soon, right now. Okay, and next poem which help us to argue and prove that Walt Whitman is a mystic is Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. And the next poem is Lilacs Last on the Dooryard Bloomed. When lilacs on the last on the dooryard bloomed. Yet another one is, right, Prayer of Columbus. Prayer of Columbus. Yet another poem that help us to substantiate the fact that Whitman is a mystic poet is Sleepers. Okay, Sleepers. Now, all right, with this, we just conclude our general introduction to Walt Whitman. Okay, now we have to commence the discussion of the poem Passage to India. I hope you have the copy of the poem with you. In fact, I shared a PDF file in your group. So keep this poem with you. Everybody, we begin the discussion of the poem right now. So let us look at the title, Passage to India. Passage to India. Okay, so let us understand what is the title about. What are the implications of the title? What are the implications of the title? Passage to India. Okay, so it means a lot of things. So in order to understand, enjoy the poem Passage to India, we have to have a clear idea of Passage to India. So besides having an idea of what the meaning of the title Passage to India, you also have to know a number of historic incidents and inventions that made Whitman write this poem Passage to India. Okay, so you have us. Okay, again, one more thing I have to tell you before discussing the poem Passage to India is certain general, rather certain themes you must prepare, or you can prepare. I want you to prepare papers on these topics. Okay, so some of the major themes or issues are discussed in this poem Passage to India. One of the topics is the poem Passage to India is about cosmic energy. Okay, cosmic energy and optimism. This poem is about cosmic energy. What is cosmic energy? You know what the cosmos is, the universe. And Passage to India is about cosmic energy. And this poem is about, we have to substantiate the fact that Passage to India is about cosmic energy and optimism. So write a paper on cosmic energy and optimism in the poem of Walt Whitman, Passage to India. Okay, cosmic energy is the energy that is existing in the cosmos or in the universe. Okay, you have energy in everything. Okay, all right. You remember the principle, right? E is m is equal to mc square. Like, and we are just looking at the entire universe, and Walt Whitman is looking at the entire America and of course Asia, and he is writing about the cosmic energy prevailing in the universe, and of course because of the existence of the cosmic energy, we of course have a reason to be hopeful. All right, and again another theme is the cosmic and the personal in the poem Passage to India. The cosmic and the personal, the universal and the personal in the poem Passage to India. Yet another topic is like what we discussed right now. Okay, mysticism in the poem Passage to India. Mysticism in the poem Passage to India, or rather Whitman as a mystic poet, or transcendentalism in the poem Passage to India. The elements of mysticism and transcendentalism in the poem Passage to India. Another is, consider the poem Passage to India as a spiritual exploration. Very, very important textual topic. Okay, I just introduced all this in advance so that, of course, our discussion, as we discuss the poem, the long poem, you can write down. Keep your notes beside you and just write down whatever points you can have for all these topics. Like, yeah, consider Passage to India as a spiritual exploration. Next, okay, this is very, very important, very textual. I have seen this question many a time in the examination. Okay, that is the material and spiritual unification in the poem Passage to India by Walt Whitman. Okay, write an essay on, write a paper on the material and spiritual unification in Passage to India. This is these are some of the possible general topics you can write papers on. You have to prepare essays on. We'll be discussing all this after the discussion, detailed discussion of the poem. Now, with this, we begin the very poem. So let us look at the title. Let's understand the title. Okay, so Passage to India. Remember, just passage, no a passage. Don't write, because examination I see some students writing a passage. That's wrong. That's the title of the novel, E.M. Forster's A Passage, right? Okay, this is of course the poem of Walt Whitman. There is no article there. Passage to India. Okay, so what is a passage? What is a passage? The very word passage means, okay, number one, it is a space. Passage is a space that connects two places. Okay, passage. That is, we discussed the title, Passage to India. Passage to India. What is passage? Passage means, number one, a space that connects two places. Very easy to understand. Okay, so this title is about a space that connects two places. A space that connects places. All right. Passage to India. Number two, what is passage? So number one, very vocabulary, okay, meaning of passage. Passage is a space that connects two places. All right. Next meaning of passage. Second meaning of passage. Passage number two means a long, narrow corridor. A long, narrow corridor, passage. All right. Number one, it's a space that connects two places. Number two is a long, narrow corridor, like a veranda, passage. Now, number three, passage. Passage is a channel. Passage is a channel. You know, you have the English channel. All right, channel. It's a way. It's a way. All right. And now let us look at the title, Passage to India. All right. Yes, this poem, Walt Whitman's poem, is about a channel or a way or a long, narrow route to India, passage to India. Okay, that is the verbal titular explanation of the poem, Passage to India. Now, let us look at the poem. So remember, I said we have to, besides understanding the very meaning of the title, we have to understand the significance of course, the poem. Like, this poem is written at a time of certain very important inventions, and we have to remember three important incidents or inventions that prompted Whitman to make this poem, Passage to India. So let us look at the three inventions. The first invention, it's good that you just write down, that we have to remember, is Whitman wrote this poem after these three major inventions, or of course very, very marvels of engineering. Okay, some of the great discoveries of engineers, inventions of the engineers. You can say that, okay, this poem is about, Passage to India is about, maybe about the engineering skills, like. All right, so number one is, okay, it's about the very opening of the Suez Canal. Okay, the very, one of the reasons for the making of the poem is 1869. Remember, 1869, we have the opening of the Suez Canal in Egypt. And with the opening of the Suez Canal in Egypt, of course, it is very, very easy for people in America and Europe to come to Asia, to go to Asiatic countries, to, of course, to go to India. So this is the opening of the Suez Canal in Egypt. Okay, Egypt is opening the Suez Canal, and now that this is the passage, right? This is the passage, one of the passages under one of the channels, which is just under which is implied in the title, Passage to India. Okay, so it's about the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. Remember, and now we have two more incidents. Okay, so what is the what are the three important global international incidents or inventions that prompted Whitman to make this poem, Passage to India? Number one, 1869, opening of the Suez Canal. All right, and number two, okay, number two is the very American Transcontinental Railroad. This is the second invention. Okay, remember, I repeat, the very American Transcontinental Railroad. Railroad, you have, of course, the railroad, railway track, and the American Transcontinental Railroad is a big revolution in transport in America. Not only in America, so also in Europe. Okay, and besides that, the opening of the Suez Canal. Egypt is opening the Suez Canal. Okay, So with these two, transport is easy. People in the different parts of America can travel from one place to another in United States of America. All right. So that is again an engineering marvel. That is this is because of scientific and technological advancement. It's because of scientific progress. Now with industrial revolution, now with scientific revolution, now with the ideas of man, now with the ideas of scientists, okay, the transport is easy, and passage to India, Walt Whitman is saluting the scientists, is praising the engineers, and he is just speaking about the two marvels of engineering in the year 1869. Number one, first marvel is the American Transcontinental Railroad. Now you have the railway and you have the trains. Goods can be just shifted from transporter from place to place. You have the passenger trains moving from different states and parts of America to the other. Okay, so this American Transcontinental Railroad. Number two, the opening of the Suez Canal, and remember, people can just cross the Cape of Good Hope, okay, and of course they can just their transport is easier. You have a shorter route between Europe, America, and Asia. All right, and he is glorifying. And besides that, remember your one more reason. Okay, that is of course the very 1866 is the year. The third engineering skill or third scientific and technological advancement of man, which is glorified by Walt Whitman in the poem Passage to India, is the 1866 transatlantic cable, rather the laying of the transatlantic cable. You know, right now with the laying of the transatlantic cable, communication is easy among nations of the world. Laying of the transatlantic cable. And what do you mean by cable? You have the cable television, you have the telephone, and now that you have laid the transatlantic cable line, communication is easy. Communication among countries of Europe and America, and in future it will of course be cable will be laid among all the nations of the world, all the continents, and communication is going to be easier. So remember, my dear students, Walt Whitman is just praising these engineering marvels in the poem Passage to India. All right. So number one, the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. Number two, 1866, laying of the transatlantic cable. Number three, the building of the great American Continental Railroad. Okay, so Transcontinental Railroad. So Whitman is just glorifying these scientific engineering skills in this poem. So you can say that, okay, Passage to India, not over. I just told you part of the maybe background to the poem, right? Okay, so besides that, again, right, so this poem, remember, it is on one side about the material scientific development of man, okay, and another side Second, it's about, of course, the spiritual advancement, or rather the spiritual skill, or the spiritual development of man. All right. So one side we have scientific development, and the other side we have, of course, spiritual development also. Okay. So remember, right now, because of number one, the Suez Canal, number two, the transatlantic communication channel, and of course, because of the railway track, transport, communication, and yeah, movement is easy. All this is because of scientific growth. Material, rather you can say that material unification of the world is possible just because of science. All right. Material unification of the world is possible just because of science. And Whitman says, no, this is not enough. Okay, scientific development helps us to have material unification of the world. People in Europe, America, Asia, Africa, Australia, or people in the 7 continents of the world can just travel from place to place and communicate with each other just because of the opening of the Suez Canal, because of the laying of the cable, because of course, the right to railroad. That is material advancement. Yeah, let us thank the scientists and science and technology. No, this is not enough. This is not enough for human beings to have happiness, for human beings to have fulfillment, for human beings to have joy. There must be a kind of unification of the material and the spiritual writer. Okay, there must be unification of the spirit and, of course, the body. So now we have material unification, and with material unification, we don't have, of course, fulfillment. There is no joy, or there is no completeness. Besides material unification, we also need spiritual unification. And spiritual unification, Walt Whitman says, is possible only through mysticism. Through mysticism. Okay? And he speaks to us, okay, in order to have spiritual unification, that is a kind of oneness between the soul, the body, and the soul of one individual with the soul of God. All right. Or for the unification of the souls of bodies and the souls of all the people with God, you need to have spiritual nourishment. You need to have spiritual advancement. And what should you do to have spiritual advancement? Okay, you have material advancement, material unification of the world with science. And in order to have spiritual unification of the body and the soul, similarly, the spiritual unification of the body and soul of all the people, what should you do? You should go to India. You should go to Asia. If the West is the place of scientific and technological development, the East, represented by India, is right a place, a home of spirituality. Okay, we have great religions in India. We have great thinkers, philosophers, gods in India, in Asia. We have, of course, Hinduism, we have Jainism, we have Buddhism, we have Zoroastrianism. We have the greatest religions of the world in the Asian countries. All right? Besides, we have greatest gods, we have greatest religions, we have a lot of holy books, the Vedas. the Upanishads. All right? And we have to immerse ourselves in the greatest religions of the world. That is, of course, the religions of Asia, religions of India. All right? So let us make a passage to India. Let us make a journey to India from America and Europe so that we become one with the God. Okay? So that, of course, we have what is called a kind of what is it? Happiness, fulfillment, moksha, nirvana, or Sachidananda, or we have heavenly bliss. All right. So this poem, Passage to India, is about the one side is about material unification of the world through engineering, science, and technology. The other side, it's about the spiritual unification of the world through religion, spirituality, and mysticism. All right, that's about Passage to India, the introduction. And now that it is almost 1 hour, we'll just wind up. I need to talk to you a little more about the very background to the poem. Thereafter, of course, we'll commence our detailed discussion of the poem Passage to India. Thank you so much for being with me and listening to me. I will just notify when I am just streaming live. Okay, just get a copy of the poem Passage to India and be ready for our detailed discussion of the poem of the greatest American poet, Walt Whitman. Have a wonderful afternoon. May God bless you. Thank you. Bye bye.